So at the end of our last video, we were talking about flat color and flatting and the difference between flat local color and flatting color. And this next slide makes that really clear. This is in the exhaustive explanation of digital coloring. So when you have line art, the next step is to fill in all of the shapes that would have a local color. And to do it professionally, you do it with weird colors like this. This is kind of a flatting color scale. I'll show you where you find it in Photoshop. So that then it's easy to replace them with the local colors you want. This is not my example. This is a professional example. But I think it's such a funny one because these colors, like that's a lot of work to find all those particular shapes and fill them, right? And then what did the professional colorists do? They just pretty much made them all rusty browns. So I'm going to show you why that's necessary. So even if you thought that looks good, the next step, which was not a professional example, is something I did to it to show you how these colors help, is then you can separate those out into shadows and light and do a lot more with those local colors if you can easily select them. So that's where flatting can really help. Because if I try to individually select that brown from this brown, that's really difficult, right? So what does flatting do? It makes that separation really obvious. So how do we set up our files to do this? So what I do is I saved my EPS file, right? I was doing it with the helicopter before. So I'll do it with the helicopter here. Find your EPS file. Don't open it, because if you open the EPS file in Photoshop, it's going to ask you to rasterize it, and that makes it no longer a vector. So what do you do instead? Just like we did for all of our compositing projects, we open up Photoshop and we open a new file, File New. That way we can control the resolution and the size. I'm just going to call this Test, because I'm going to delete all of these. Assignment. So instead of test, you're going to name it with your name, and you're going to say assignment 5, and this is going to be your color spot illustration. This one Photoshop file will have your line art and your coloring, and it will have your vector line art. And then the size we're going to use, because we're going to be using these for posters in the next assignment, is either 11 by 14 or 14 by 11. It depends if your illustration is taller than it is wide. In that case, like mine, it's going to be 11 inches wide by 14 inches tall. Or if it's wider than it is tall, it would be 14 inches wide, 11 inches tall. So, landscape or portrait. And then the resolution is going to be our studio resolution. It's going to be 350 pixels per inch. So 11 by 14 by 350 or 14 by 11 by 350. So now we have this. It's 11 by 14 by 350, just like when we were making things print ready. Pretend you're just making your vector line art print ready. We're going to drag and drop our EPS onto our 11 by 14 at 350 pixels per inch. And then I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to place it. And when you hold down Option and you place it, it will shrink it towards the middle. Pretend this is a mat on the outside, right? If it's distorting on you like this, then you want to hold down Shift. Mine is set up so that you only hold down Shift to distort it. But you don't want to distort it. You want to keep it at, your intended height and width ratio. Okay, so I'm just going to make it look nice there. There we go. And now I hit return, and what do I see? This should be a little familiar to you. I see my line art, but it has that little box in it, right back from exercise 1. And if I try to erase it, it will tell me you can't because it's a smart object. This is a protected vector. So I don't want to rasterize it, right? So what do I do to protect it? I'm going to mark it gray, and I'm going to lock it. And then the background I also want to protect because I don't want to add color to the background. The background is the blank white paper. So I'm going to double click it so I can rename it blank white. Say OK. And then because I've changed it from a background layer to a regular layer, I'm able to lock it. You just, on the background layer, you double click. And then it will change it to layer 0 and then rename it blank white. So double click not on the name, but next to it, like you're doing a layer style. All right. So now, where does color go? This is my metaphor for digital coloring. I like to have real world metaphors, right? This is a sandwich. Digital coloring is always a sandwich. And it has black bread on the top. That is your line art. And it has white bread on the bottom. So where does the color go? It goes in between these. So I make a new layer. I'm going to mark it yellow because this is like cheese. And I'm going to label this one flatting. This would be professional practice. Use flatting when you have no idea really what colors you want. And how do I get my flatting colors? I have my color options here. I can reset your defaults if they're missing, or you can find them under Window. And I'm going to go to Swatches. And then I'm going to go down in Swatches to Pastels and open that up. These are the flatting colors. These are the most basic combinations of cyan, magenta, and yellow. None of them have black in them, right? So now I'm going to do something weird. I could paint. I could pick one of these colors, like this red, and say I want to make my helicopter red, so I start painting. And notice how that color is now behind the line art, like on a coloring book, but behind the lines. But that's not very efficient, right? I could do this, which is how I used to teach it when I had more patience. So use the magic wand, have contiguous checked, click on your black line art that's protected, select the areas you want to fill, and as long as they're a contained shape, move that selection to flatting, then use the paint bucket, click on the color you want, and fill it. This is the faster way that I do it, now that I have less patience. Make a duplicate of your line art layer. Rasterize that duplicate. Move that duplicate underneath. Okay? And rename it flatting. Now, all you do is you use the paint bucket, you pick your color, and you never have to change layers. You just start filling it in with these different colors. Anything that I want white, like the reflection in the window, I'm going to make yellow. Because if you want something colored, even if you want it colored white eventually, you have to fill it in with flatting. So that's how it is set up. This is the way to speed it up. So I changed my flatting. I made a duplicate of my line art. Command J. I right-clicked and rasterized it. I moved that underneath, and I renamed it flatting and made it yellow. And this keeps you from having to use the magic wand and go between layers all the time. But it's going to give us the same end result. And that way, I'm just on this layer. Every other layer is locked. That's my biggest suggestion for when you do digital coloring, is lock every layer you are not using. Because the really costly error is accidentally coloring something that you didn't want to color on the wrong place. Now you can use the same colors, but you don't ever want to use the same colors on things that are touching each other or close to each other. And then remember, like the really little things too, those also need to get filled. So I'm just doing this as a quick example. Okay, I'll come help. But let me finish this off so you can see what you want at the end, because sometimes you need kind of the picture of where you're going. All right, to finish this off, what do I do now? I turn off my black line art, and I'm going to get rid of the black line art in this one. Now that I've filled in everything, even what's going to be white, then I use my magic wand. I uncheck contiguous. I click on the black, and I delete it all. Because that's what flatting color looks like. And it's just floating there like pieces of Velveeta cheese in interesting shapes and colors. And when the line art is on top of it, it will look fully colored. But that's your vector line art. And then with white behind, you get it all. So you're just making a coloring book. I'm going to just save this as a PSD. And this is where I'll show different techniques, but this isn't my finished project. My finished project just has the helicopter as just a little part of it, right? So there's a lot to fill with this. So how do I set this up? I'm just going to do it quickly again. I am going to first mark my line art gray. It's 11 by 14 by 350 because my illustration is taller than it is wide. My vector can be made to fill any resolution. So if you need to change your resolution to make it 11 by 14 by 350, that's fine. My background, I'm going to double click and change to blank white. And then I'm going to lock it. And I'm also going to lock the gray line art. So now what do? I need a color layer in between the black bread and the white bread. And to do that easily and quickly, I make a duplicate of the line art, and then I rasterize that duplicate. How do we make a duplicate? Command J. I rasterize the duplicate by right-clicking on the layer and clicking on Rasterize Layer. Then I move it underneath, in between the slices of bread. And then I'm going to mark it yellow, like cheese, for a grilled cheese sandwich. And then I'm going to call it flatting. Now, what tool do I use? I use the paint bucket tool. What colors do I use? I don't have to think about it. I use the swatches. If you don't see it, go under Window, and you'll find swatches. And use the pastels. So this is if you want to do flatting. So this is the professional coloring skill of flatting. If you want to skip it, you certainly can. And you can go right to doing your local flat color. I just want you to get used to the technique, right? And that's why I'm demonstrating it. The reason flatting is a professional skill is it's usually done by someone else than the person who does the real coloring, right? Because it's just kind of busy work, but it's really helpful in setting it up. But if I knew, for instance, that I want my Kermit to be green, I might start with these pastel flatting colors, but use ones that all kind of related. So I might use like the yellows and the blues. And if I know the back of his throat is going to be red, right? Actually, yeah, that's red, and then this is going to be, let's make it purple. So you'll be surprised how effective these pastels are. But yes, you can use other colors as well. But the goal for flat color is that it's easily defined. And I'm going to do every other one of these orange. And it's like those kind of coloring book websites where you can just click and fill it in. And this makes them very easy to change and select later. And where flatting is especially helpful is when you actually really don't have any idea of what kind of color you want to use. This just gets it started for you. Now, notice